Alright, hello everybody. So for this demo, we will be showing you how to do cast preparations. Right. So as I've mentioned before, our cast preparations are divided into two. The first one we will need to simulate the mouth preps that are done to the patient. And the second one is the actual cast preparation where we do blockouts, relief, and beading. Okay, so as you can see, we have our two casts here. The surveying has been completed. Right, there's tissue undercuts, survey lines on the abutments to be used. Okay, tissue undercuts. Alright, so that's the upper. And this is the lower. Okay. Notice here on the right, on the left side, the buccal left side, gingival to the premolar, there was no tissue undercut seen. Okay, pero sa kabila, on the right side, meron. Okay, there's presumptive retentive undercuts. Okay. Alright. So for the simulation of the mouth prep, the things that we will need to do is basically yung rest seat preps nyo. Okay, for this case, I would like all rests to be seated on a rest seat. So kailangan natin i-prep yung rest seats. So where are the rests? You just have to go back to your design. This is my design. And let's see. No? We have cingulum rests on the upper canines, a mesial-occlusal rest on the 7, and the mesial-occlusal rest on the 5. Okay? On the 1-5. So, gagayahin nyo lang yung design. You take your carver, the cleoid end, and you make your rest seats. So, follow yung recommended dimensions. The deepest part of your rest seat should be where it's closest to the long axis of the tooth. Alright. Dimensions should be around 1 to 1.5 millimeters deep so that you do not excessively expose the dentine. Okay. And again, on the cingulum rests. Cingulum rest is V-shaped around the cingulum. Okay. You have to angle your cleoid in such a manner that you reduce it from the incisal, ha? Hindi pa ganon. Because if you try to make cingulum rest seats na your cleoid carver is pointed perpendicular to the lingual slope, you're going to create a roof. No? It has to be a bit directed towards the axial of the canine. Okay? Alright. And when you're creating cingulum rests, you will invariably reduce the lingual slope as well. Hindi may iwasan yan. Alright, so you do all the rest seats. Also, besides the rest seats, you will also be doing the guide planes. So you look at your cast, see if there's any need for a guide plane. No? I think this one needs a little bit of a guide plane because this is going to receive proximal plate. right there, distal to the 1.5. And also on the mesial of 2.7. Ito hindi kailangan yun sa K9. No? There's no survey line naman present there. 1.3 and 2.2 appears to be directed na nagda-diverge sila incisally, no? So there's no undercuts seen here, nothing here. So there's no need maybe for a guide plane there. Okay? Also, if you will see that survey line here is a bit too occlusal. Right? So anong gagawin nyo dyan? I'll leave that up to you. Kung anong pwede mong gawin dyan. So that's, this type of occlusal, this type of survey line is unacceptable because remember, a rigid part, if it's going to be emerging from the mesial wrist, the clasp, I mean the retentive clasp, and it's going to be a suprabulge, hindi pwedeng ganito kataas yung survey line mo. Here. On the mesiobuccal aspect. So you have to do something about that. I'll leave that up to you. Okay? Alright. So those are the things that you need to do. No? Resi preps, creation of guide planes. If you have enameloplasty that you think that you need to do, for example, to lower the survey line, to create undercuts, do so at this juncture, right? In the next video, I will show you will be how to create blockouts, relief. Okay, thank you. All right, so now we're going to do the second part of the cast preparation, which is blockouts, relief, and beading. Okay, I don't know if you can see it, but before I start off with my cast prep for the upper, I made an outline of where the framework will lie. The reason for that is I need to find out where I can put my blockouts, particularly my parallel blockouts, no? Like for this, for example, I know where the truss arm is going to go up to connect to the rest. So alam ko na dapat this undercut here will need to be blocked out. We'll need to have a parallel blockout. The border of my major connector is right here, so I know that this part would need to be scored or beaded. And I know where my resin base is going to start from. So I know kung saan siya kailangan maglagay ng relief. And here I know where it's marked here in slightly lang, no, in blue. So I know where to put my wax reliefs. Okay? If you look at the buckle, right there, I've also drawn where my suprabulge clasp is going to cross. So I know where I have to start my shape blockout. Oh. So that's one piece of advice that you can use. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is I usually start off with parallel blockouts. Okay, so some faculty members would require you to use plaster, no? Me, I'm okay with using either plaster or wax. So para mas madali, maybe you can use wax na lang. Alright? Be careful with using your alcohol lamp, guys, okay? Let me remind you again. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is to block out the tissue undercut here because I am going to use a gingivally approaching clasp. Right? Okay. So the approach arm is going to cross there, and for it to be able to not engage the tissue undercut, kailangan naka-blockout siya. So I can use, I have plenty of half round gauge, 6 half rounds, so pwede ko siyang gamitin. So I can use the blue wax to block out the undercut here. Add more. Okay, so you can overfill that part, and then you just use an instrument to carve out yung excess. Okay. Alright. So notice that when I'm carving, and ganito yung orientation ng blade, it needs to be parallel to where your supposed path of insertion is, right? So you keep doing this until your tissue undercut is blocked out. Normally, no, ideally, we do the wax removal of the tissue undercut, or the tissue block, the parallel blackout. Normally, we do that ideally on a surveyor. Sana. It's not, we don't have. So we make do with what we have. Medyo napadami yung pagbawas. So let's add some more. Okay. Alright, so that's your blackout. Okay. So the next is parallel blackouts. Oh, before that pala, don't forget also to block out yung areas kung saan dadaan yung mga truss arms. Right here. And right here. Okay. There's a truss arm that's going to cross around this area here. So we need to block that out. Okay, so that is an example of your parallel blockout. Next, you'll be talking about shape blockout. Okay, so this is the parallel blockout done. I forgot to mention that there's going to be a gingivally approaching clasp, diba? It's going to go down from the denture base connector, and then it's going to have a vertical approach arm towards the undercut here. So obviously the approach arm, it's rigid, and it's going to cross the undercut where the sulcus is. So you need to block out this area din pala. Okay? To protect the sulcus. Right? And the sulcus is protected all around. Here also, where the proximal plate is going to come up, the undercut immediately below the guide plane needs to be covered with a parallel blockout. Okay? Alright. So next is a shape blockout. What you can use is wax. Like I said, you can also use plaster. A little later, maybe I'll show you what a plaster blockout looks like. But for now, for the demo purpose, para mas mabilis yung demo natin, I can use wax. Right? So I have plenty of half-round, 6 half-round gauge casting wax. What I did was I took a piece and I cut it lengthwise. So I have a ledge immediately. And remember, I also slightly marked where the inferior border of my C-clasp is going to be para madali ko siyang mailagyan ng shape blockout. So the rigid third emerging from the mesial and the semi-rigid third needs to be above the survey line, right? And then it dips into the retentive undercut on the flexible third. So basically, the outline of my C-clasp, the inferior border, would look like this. And that's what I need to block out with a ledge. So I just use this, my half round modified, and I follow where that blue line is, where I marked. It's okay to be excessive dito pagdating dito sa proximal because you're going to remove it anyway. Right, so that's the ledge. Next is we're going to lute it. We lute the inferior border. I always have a piece of wax right where the alcohol lamp is para yun yung ginagawa kong well. There, the ledge is luted. And then cut its piece. And then we shall. And mag-focus. There. I'm going to modify this a bit and I'll show you after. Okay, so this is the shape blockout done. Notice how thick the ledge is on all sides. Here. You see? The lingual is for the reciprocal arm. For the buccal, it's for the retentive arm. Okay. I've also blocked out all the circular areas where the rigid components will cross. No? So lahat ng mga sulcus ang dadaanan ng proximal plates and truss arms. you want to be able to block them out so we keep the gingiva safe. Alright, like I said, you can use wax or you can use plaster, whichever is acceptable, right? Some of the faculty would prefer plaster because it's more durable. It doesn't break off easily. Okay, so this is another example of a shape blockout. Notice how thick it is on all sides, right? Again, on the buccal and on the lingual. You have to make shape blockouts for both reciprocal and retentive arms. For this premolar, I only only did a shape blockout on the lingual because on the facial or on the buccal, I'm planning to do a gingivally approaching clasp. Okay. There we go. Right? I'll block this out eventually with, since there's no components that's going to cross here, we will do arbitrary blackouts here. But we'll do that a bit later. I've also outlined where the denture base will terminate. Okay. So what's next? What's next is we place our relief. So for the upper, the first thing we do, before anything else, we need to score kung nasaan yung border ng major connector. So let me do that now. Alright. Next is we're going to place the relief over the denture base areas. For the upper, you just need one layer lang. Okay? So I don't think it's visible now, but I can see it through the wax where I placed the borders. So I just have to follow that. So on the palatal side, your borders should be where your denture base would end. On the buccal side, ang borders mo, just go over the crest, no? There's no borders here. What we want you to do is just go over the crest. Okay? Because this is for a metal framework. No? Your metal framework usually ends at around the crest, diba? So, for the relief here, just go over the crest and lute it. Alright, and then you place tissue stop. Alright, so I'll do that for the rest of the cast. Alright, so this is the relief done. Right, there's the beading here for the posterior border of the major connector. Tissue stop. I've also done the arbitrary blackouts. So every undercut that I can find that's not going to be included in the design, or any rigid components are not going to cross, you blocked it out so that I can easily remove when I take the impression. No? Mas madali siya makuha ng impression, and I can duplicate it easily. Alright, so that's the upper. Next, we will go to the lower. Okay, so now we're going to do the wax relief for the lower. It's different from the upper because we're going to use 2 layers of sheet wax here. The first layer is provided so that the major connector or the metal framework does not contact the lingual mucosa, because it ulcerates very easily. And the second layer of the sheet wax is for the relief of the denture base connectors, so that there's space for the acrylic to flow beneath. Okay, so like I have mentioned, we have, instead of using wax, we used plaster to create the shaped and arbitrary blackouts. And now we're going to use sheet wax to create the wax relief. So we get 1 layer of sheet wax first here, and we soften it a bit. So we start out at the anterior. That's the first layer. And cut off the excess. We cover all the lingual mucosa. put it in place. Okay. So that's the first layer. The second layer corresponds to the mesh. Now, clear this first. Just make sure that the crowns are all showing. Okay. Alright. So it doesn't necessarily have to follow a form or the form of your major connector. The only thing that I'm concerned with is that are the teeth or the crowns visible? Hindi ba siya covered ng wax? Hindi naman, di ba? So even if it extends past the buccal, that's fine. If it extends past on the lingual into the sulcus and into this area right here, that's also fine, right? The purpose of the relief or the green wax is to provide relief. It doesn't necessarily have to follow the form of your major connector, so that's no problem with that. Going to look this forward. All right. Okay. I don't know if you can see this, but there's this line here that I've drawn, and it corresponds to where your denture base begins, right? So if you're going to put the secondary layer, the second layer of your sheet wax, we're going to move it maybe about 1 millimeter away from that line. Okay. So this is the second layer. you can see. Okay, so that is a distinct internal line angle for a secondary layer. Alright, it doesn't have to follow any form. You just need to add relief here. Alright, so what we do next is the other parts for the relief here and there. Okay, so this is the finished cast preparation for the lower. Notice the distinction, between the first and the second layer, so as to create a way to fabricate an internal finish line. Okay, there's one here, the posterior, another here, the anterior. See the distinction between the two layers, and the distinction between two layers here as well for the distal extension base. Okay, so kailangan magkahiwalay silang lahat. Like I've mentioned, we use plaster for the shaped blockout and for the parallel blockouts. It's luted all around. This wax here is for arbitrary blackouts. Maybe I'll extend it a little past. I did it hanggang dito. So the arbitrary blackout will provide ease of removal when you do impression taking for this cast, right? So arbitrary blackouts again here, arbitrary blackouts there para madaling matanggal when you take an impression. Okay, there's a parallel blackout here, right? And that's the lower. Also your tissue stop is right there, your rest cast stop. For the upper, you see the difference between the two. This one has 2 layers. The upper only has 1 layer of relief. Okay, some arbitrary blackouts again. And this one we used, instead of plaster, we used wax to create shape blackouts and parallel blackouts. Okay, but they're pretty much the same. Acceptable naman siya. There's the scoring here at the middle. I could have avoided the median palatal raphe, no? Kasi dapat hindi siya nagbe-bear ng any scoring, but since it's not prominent, it's okay, no? Nag-bead tayo past the raphe, or across the raphe. That's fine. Okay, so those are the two. Before you go on and taking an impression of your cast, review your cast prep and make sure that you have your designs with you, right? Check if everything's covered. See if you have any supra bulge clasps. Do they have shaped blackouts underneath, right? So for example, for this one, for this premolar, I've decided to use an I-bar to cross gingivally here, but the lingual has a reciprocal arm, so that's why the shape blackout is only on the lingual, right? So you check your designs before you go on taking an impression. Okay, right? Oh, I forgot to place an I-bar here, but anyway, get an idea. Okay, so next thing I'll show you is the refractory cast. Alright, so this is the refractory cast after I've taken impression of the master cast with the cast preparations. Notice the tissue stop is still visible, the blockouts are there, there's another blockout there, the finish lines are distinct, finish lines are again, it's here, you can see it. Okay, alright, so that's the lower. Okay, now the upper is here. Okay, so the scoring was duplicated very well, and the finish lines are there. May mga konting porosities, but that's okay. Blackouts are visible, duplicated very well. Okay, so this is what we're going to expect after you've taken an impression of your cast spread. Okay, that's it.